In this video, we are going to talk about factoring. Factoring is the opposite of expanding. The first step in every factoring is to see if there is a common factor between the terms. For example, 12x squared minus 3x. We can see that first 3 is common between 12 and 3 because they are divisible by 3. And x squared and x, they have an x common. So we can factor 3x and we get 3x. 12x squared divided by 3x gives us 4x. And negative 3x divided by 3x gives us negative 1. The next type of factoring is difference of squares. This type of factoring is, first of all, you have to have two terms. This is the first term. This is the second term. Also, both terms, you can find the square root of both terms easily. And also, the sign between the two has to be subtraction. Now, if you can find this type of binomial, then you can say that a squared minus b squared is a minus b times a plus b, difference of squares. You can just check this one by just multiplying, the terms together, and you're going to end up with a squared minus b squared. The first example is 121x squared minus 16y squared. First of all, check to see if 121x squared can be square root. 121 square root of it is 11. X squared, the square root of it is x. 16, the square root is 4. Y squared, the square root is y. So I can write this one as 11x minus 4y and 11x plus 4y. The next example, 9x squared minus 25. 9x squared, if you find the square root, is 3x. 25, if you find the square root, is 5. So I can write as 3x plus 5 times 3x minus 5. The next example, 81x4 minus 16y4. The square root of 81x4 is 9x squared. The square root of 16y4 is 4y squared. So I can write this one as 9x squared plus 4y squared times 9x squared minus 4y squared. You may be tempted to stop here, but if you look at this bracket, the square root of x squared is 9x squared is 3x. The square root of 4y squared is 2y. So I can write this one as 3x plus 2y times 3x minus 2y. And this one, I can't do anything, so I just write it down here the way it is. So the factor of 81x4 minus 16y4 is this one. Another type of expression that can be factored is a simple trinomial. In a simple trinomial, you're always dealing with three terms. The first term has x squared, no coefficient, the coefficient is 1, and then you have bx plus c. This is a simple trinomial, and hopefully, if you are able, you have to find two numbers where the product of the two numbers is c, and the sum of the two numbers is b. Again, this simple trinomial only works if the a coefficient, which is beside x squared, is 1. Then, if we find those two numbers, let's say x1 and x2, then we can write x squared plus bx plus c is equal to x plus x1 times x plus x sub 2. The first example, we have to factor this simple trinomial x squared minus x minus 12. Since the coefficient of x squared is 1 and there are 3 terms, we are going to try to see if we can use the sum and product method. So we have to find two numbers that they multiply to negative 12 and they add up to negative 1. Those two numbers are negative 4 and 3. Because negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, negative 4 plus 3 gives you negative 1. So I can write this one is x minus 4 times x plus 3. If you expand this one, you get x squared plus 3x minus 4x minus 12 minus 4x plus 3x gives you minus x, which is given here. The next example, we have to factor 2x squared minus 2x minus 12. You can see that the a coefficient is equal to 2. It is not a 1. But I'm going to try with common factor. I can factor out 2 here. I get x squared minus x minus 6. Now the a coefficient here is equal to 1 and there are 3 terms, so let's use the sum and product method. Find two numbers, the product is negative 6 and they add up to negative 2. Those two numbers are negative 3 and 2 because negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. So this one is equal to 2 x minus 3 times x plus 2. Again, if you multiply and expand this one, you get x squared plus 2x minus 3x is negative x. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Another type of factoring that we have to consider is called complex trinomial. In this type of factoring, we have a trinomial of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a cannot be factored out. One way of doing this is, hopefully, this technique works, which is called the decomposition method. And the way it works is the following. You multiply a and c together, meaning this coefficient and this coefficient, and also you consider b. Now you are going to try to find two numbers that the product is ac, the multiplication of a and c, and the sum is b. If you can find those two numbers, then you can express bx in terms of those two numbers, and then you can go ahead and you can decompose the middle term and you can continue with factoring. The best way to explain this one is with a couple of examples. Let's consider 6x squared minus x minus 12. You can see that the a coefficient is 6 and you cannot factor 6 out. So to factor this one, we are going to find the product of 6 and negative 12. So we say 6 times negative 12 is negative 72 and b is equal to negative 1. Now we are going to try to find two numbers. The product is negative 72 and the sum is negative 1. Those two numbers are negative 9 and 8, because negative 9 times 8 is negative 72 and negative 9 plus 8 is negative 1. So I can decompose the middle term, which is negative x, to negative 9x plus 8x. So I'm going to write it as 6x squared negative 9x plus 8x minus 12. Now group these two terms together and these two terms together and factor the common elements. The common elements between 6x squared minus 9x is 3x. So from 6x squared I get 2x, and from 9x I get negative 3. 8x minus 12, the common factor is going to be 4, so I get 2x minus 3. Now if you look, 2x minus 3 is common between both terms, so I can factor 2x minus 3 out, and I get 3x plus 4. This is the factor of the original expression. Next type of factoring that we have to consider is the perfect square trinomial. First of all, we are dealing with 3 terms. If you have a trinomial of the form a squared plus or minus 2ab plus b, it can be written as a plus or minus b. The reason is that if you expand this, which is the same as a plus or minus b times a plus or minus b, you get exactly the same thing back here. Now this means that if you have a trinomial, this is how you can figure out if you can use perfect square term trinomial. Take the square root of the first term, take the square root of the third term, and see if the product of the two square roots times 2 is going to be the middle number, either plus or minus. Then you know you can use the perfect square trinomial. Now consider the example 9x squared minus 30x plus 25. Again, we are dealing with 3 terms here. The square root of 9x squared is 3x. The square root of 25, the last term, is 5. If we multiply these 2 terms times 2, we're going to get 10 times 3 is 30x. Since the middle term is negative 30x, this means I can use the perfect square trinomial. So I can write this one as 3x minus 2 minus 5 squared. If you expand this one, you're going to get this expression back. Now we are going to use what we have learned about factoring so far to solve equation using factoring. When we are dealing with solving equation, the first thing we do is that we try to see if we can use any factoring technique that we learned before. For example, if we want to solve this equation, I'm going to bring negative 1 to the left, so I'm going to get x squared minus 10x plus 21 is equal to 0. Now, since the coefficient of x squared is 1, first, I cannot do any common factor. The coefficient of x squared is 1, so I can use the sum and product. I'm looking for 2 numbers that the product is 21, they add up to negative 10. Those 2 numbers are negative 3 and negative 7, because negative 3 times negative 7 is 21, negative 3 plus negative 7 is negative 10. So I can write the left-hand side of this expression as x minus 3 times x minus 7 equal to 0. Now, when the product of 2 numbers is 0, either both of them or at least one of them has to be 0. So from here, I can deduce that either x minus 3 is 0. So from here, I get x is equal to 3, or x minus 7 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 7. So these 2 are the roots or the zeros of this equation. And I used factoring to solve the problem. The next problem is 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 equals to 0. Again, there is nothing common here, so I can't use common factoring. Coefficient a for x squared is 2, so I can't use the sum and product. The only choice I have is to use decomposition method. So I'm going to say 2 times negative 3, AC, is negative 6, and B is 5. So I have to find 2 numbers. The product is negative 6, and they add up to 5. This means the two numbers are -1 and 6, because -1 times 6 is -6, -1 plus 6 is 5. So I can write above as 2x squared minus x plus 6x minus 3 is equal to 0. Now I can factor between these two. I can factor x out, so I get 2x minus 1 plus, and 6x and minus 3, I can factor 3 out. I get 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. 2x minus 1 is the same, common between them, so I can factor 2x minus 1 out, and I'm going to end up with x plus 3 is equal to 0. Again, the product of two numbers is 0. Either one or both of them, they have to be 0. So 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. So this means that x is 1 over 2, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. This means that x is equal to -3. Again, I was able to solve the equation using factors.